Welcome, everyone, to episode 124 of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, a scumbag pretending to be a good guy. But, I know somebody who is a good guy just pretending to be a scumbag. And I think he's sitting across the camera from me right now. Who's here with me?
Well, it is I, Exquisite Corpse Steve Guntley, here to take the lid off the id. This is the podcast about cough syrup shots, hug-a-bugs, and mannequin lap dances. That's because this is the podcast about Jigsaw. No, not that one. A deeply strange 2002 Tempe film about the horrors of a Midwestern art school. Yeah, excited to be talking about this one. This was kind of a last-minute scheduled change for us. We had some guests lined up who unfortunately were not able to make it. We wanted to save those movies to talk about that. So we spun the wheel. We picked a movie from deep in our catalog that we didn't really know anything about.
Oh, Steve, be honest with our listeners. We did not spin the wheel. Tubi would not stop suggesting this movie to you.
Yes,
so
Tubi spun the wheel
you
to us, yeah.
Yeah, we just had to say, all right, fine, Tubi, Jigsaw it is, and here we are.
We're giving Tubi the assist on this one, and really we should give them more credit for a lot of what they do for this show, because I would say most of the shows that we cover are findable on Tubi in some way or another. And I just love their weird vibe. I just love that. I don't know. They're the weird bastard black sheep of the streaming world, and that just makes them so lovable. I don't know. There's just so much weird stuff going on there. But one of the weirder things going on there is a movie called Jigsaw. A little bit about this film. It was released October 22nd, 2002. It's directed and written by Don Adams and Henry Picardi, and it stars Barrett Walls, Amy Bravo, Mia Zifkin, Arthur Simon, Marin Lindo, James Palmer, Mark Vollmers, David Wesley Cooper, Marissa Adams, and Brian Ellis as the titular Jigsaw. Yeah, did you have any kind of anticipate? What did you anticipate going into this movie? Like, did you know much about what this was?
No, not at all. And I have, sort of a baseline knowledge of Tempe stuff. I mean, when we're talking about Tempe, we're talking about the J.R. Bookwalter era. We're talking about micro budgets. We've handled a handful of those movies on the show already. We've had J.R. on the show already. Mm-hmm. Some of those movies come with a reputation. This is one that has been, whether intentionally or not, more or less buried. It seems like this is one that does not get much attention other than the fact that it seems to be one that J.R. Bookwalter himself likes quite a bit from this time period.
Yeah.
I did not know anything about it. I always thought it was funny to see the cover art, the name of the movie, and the year it came out, because I think, a cynical viewer might look at this and be like, oh, well, here we go, cashing in on the whole Saw thing.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this
fully
predates
2 years before it. Yeah,
this predates Saw, and I think Jigsaw is a movie title that has been done a number of times. If you want to also, not even including the 2017 one, but you also want to include the Jigsaw Man as well. This is a popular movie title. I think the idea of Jigsaw, you can have a lot of fun with it. There is a very cool movie from 1962 called Jigsaw. There is like a film noir that was called Jigsaw. There's this
the
movie.
French Otone.
French Otone movie.
Yeah, pretty cool one.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
It's an evocative title. I mean, it's really good. I feel kind of bad that like Saw sort of has the monopoly on Jigsaw at this moment, because it's, I don't know, it's short, it's punchy, it sounds kind of like, the word itself sounds kind of jagged in a way that I like, So
8 out of every 10 people are going to rent that movie in the hopes of seeing John Kramer.
Yeah.
Like a little Tobin Bell appearance there, and the other 2 people would be us, because we know what we're getting into.
And even then, I didn't totally know what I was getting into. There's not much about this, and it came from the video aisle, but Dave J does describe it as kind of one of the more forgotten movies of the Tempe era. And like you said, he highlights that J.R. Bookwalter likes it a lot, and he also highlights that it's very divisive. And if you look at the IMDb ratings of it, it is real like 1 star or 7 star. It's like always kind of vacillating between those two polarities. Nobody's gonna like go full 10 stars on this movie, I don't think, and I'm not either. I think I'm kind of leaning more towards the 7, if I'm being honest, like in a surprising kind of way.
Yeah, I feel like I vacillated between the 1 and the 7 multiple times watching this movie. I'm excited to talk about this one because I had a real experience watching this.
Hmm.
I sort of felt in the beginning, I think I know what they're doing here. I think I know what this movie is up to. I think I can appreciate it. Then it took a turn where I went, okay, no, I was wrong.
No.
This movie is something else that I was not expecting. And then it kind of changed again. And I went from being like initially very charitable and very defensive in favor of the movie
Yeah.
to then being like, oh no, okay, I get where these low reviews come in. Then
Right.
kind of landing somewhere maybe in the middle when all was said and done. But we talked about how this movie is called Jigsaw, and there's a lot of movies called Jigsaw, and this is not related to the movie Saw, and it's an interesting premise. We don't do a beat by beat plot synopsis for this show, but just to pull very quickly from IMDb for one sentence, a group of art students working on their final project soon learn that putting a little of themselves into their work can be a bad thing. So essentially, they're in this very small class with a very casual professor, and they're talking about this final project. And he has a mannequin, which is broken into, a bunch of its appendages, all separated. And he says, your final project is you're going to take one of these limbs, you're going to do something to it, and we're going to reassemble this mannequin and kind of learn something about everyone. And it is a novel premise, so much so that if you think about it and you're somebody with a background in B movies and you are the kind of person who studies these things, it might sound eerily similar to a 1995 movie called The Fear, which is
Mm.
a movie where a group of college seniors who are at a cottage do a psychological experiment called fear therapy. And there's this giant wooden figure, not unlike a mannequin, that kind of represents all of their fears and traumas.
Yeah.
So, for the movie Jigsaw, as you mentioned when you gave us the stats for this movie, Steve, this movie was written and directed by the same two people, Don Adams and Harry James Picardi, who I think were Wisconsin-based filmmakers, if I'm using where the movie was shot
Yes.
to be that. But they're clearly familiar with this movie, The Fear. I think they have maybe, what would this look like as we take it into the new millennium? Because the movie The
Sure.
Fear was from the mid 90s. So it's kind of the same premise, but it is given a very, very 2002 treatment in Jigsaw. But
Yeah.
again, I still think for a movie as cheap and as quickly made as this one, I think 12 days was the shoot time on this one in
Yeah.
Wisconsin,
$30,000. Yeah.
$30,000. It is slightly more novel concept than just tiny terrors attacking or, some kind of mythical demon being that's summoned with some kind of backstory. I think the idea of personal trauma, and I think modern horror movies should pull from this. It would be a refreshing change of pace if monsters in modern horror movies were really just manifestations of trauma. Any filmmakers out there listening, like try it out.
Yeah, let's see if I think we should give it a shot. I think it's about time that somebody tried that, a horror movie about trauma. Yeah, yeah, that's secretly all about the damage that we do to ourselves. And maybe the monsters are like maybe not as much of a threat as the humans. I don't know, just throwing that out there. Just throwing that
This
out
is
there
good
for you.
stuff. Like we should be patenting and copywriting some of these ideas.
We really should. We really should. I was not aware that that's what The Fear was about. That's a movie I've seen on the video store shelves ever since I was a kid. I saw the little like dead-eyed wooden man on the cover, and I had no idea what it was about and never really got around to looking into it. So that
Oh,
is
well,
interesting.
are you sure you weren't just looking at the cover of Fear, starring Dead-Eyed Wooden Man Mark Wahlberg?
That one I have seen, and that's a pretty cool movie. But
That's
this
a
one,
fun
yeah,
movie. I'm
yeah,
just joking.
that's
I have nothing against Mark Wahlberg's acting early in his career. I like a couple of those early roles, and
he's
that's one of
intentionally
them.
dead-eyed in that movie, I think. Yeah, yeah, supposed to be. But yeah, no, I was not aware that's what this was about. But uh, yeah, I was not really expecting this movie to remind me as much of it as it did of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. This seems to be
That's
operating on that. So it's kind of got that same thing. It's like this one manic, drunken night between like a bunch of casual acquaintances, and all of their truths start coming out, and their venom starts coming out as the nights progress and they get deeper and deeper into their cups. That's kind of what's happening for the majority of this movie, to the point where it's almost jarring when a saw-handed like punk rock mannequin guy starts murdering people. Like, it's almost a little, we don't get any kind of explanation as to why this is happening. We don't get any kind of payoff or conclusion about why this is happening or anything. So it is just a little bit out of nowhere. I think they're making do with what they have. I think they were able to shoot at this bar. They had the rights to shoot there, and so I think they had to kind of write most of the movie around being like trapped in this bar, and you probably couldn't make too much of a mess of it. You notice all the kills take place outside, where you can't get any gore splattered on anything. So I'm wondering if there's a lot of that, but I found myself being really kind of drawn into it because this is a far more character-based horror film than we see in a lot of Full Moon. Like,
for
I'm not
better or
saying
for
these,
worse. You are correct.
yeah,
It is
I'm not saying
definitely more character based.
I'm not saying it's particularly nuanced or that these are great characters or anything, but it is interesting how human focused this is for a really long time. And even the creature itself, the Jigsaw, the man that they put together, the idea is, okay, so these are all art students, right? And I have not gone to a Wisconsin art school, so I don't really know too much about this, but this is, they explain early in the movie that this is a exercise called the exquisite corpse. Basically it's making art by committee a little bit. It's everybody contributing a little bit of their own art to make this kind of pastiche, right? And the professor, who looks fully 6 years younger than any of his students, but he has all the creepiness of a much older man, so it works out that way. But he assigns them to each kind of put a little bit of their own trauma into each of the limbs of this mannequin that he assigns to them. So we get a little brief montage of everybody kind of assembling their mannequins, and then a lot of the bulk of the dialogue in this bar scene, when they meet up after hours to discuss their project before burning it in effigy, they're going to sit around and they're going to talk about what they put into the project and why they put it in there. And it ranges in a couple of ways. Like, there's the one girl who's like a little insecure and doesn't really know what to put in, so she just kind of takes a bunch of headlines about 9/11 and just sort of lines the leg with that. But then you have a woman who's in an abusive marriage with like this really loathsome like trucker dude, giving a very committed performance. I will shout him out. Like, it really going for it here. She's in this abusive, shitty marriage, and she puts like the broken shards of a plate in there that, like, after a fight, and other things like that. The more disturbing one, where it goes into like full on Gremlins territory, is the hot party girl who describes having a suicide pact with her younger sister. Her sister goes through with it and she chickens out and is still alive. So she's using the shotgun that her sister killed herself with as the arm of this mannequin. And I'm just like,
and they show her
whoa,
go through like the garage and find this shotgun that she's held onto this whole time, and then saw off the end of the shotgun to put it on the arm, Travis Bickle style. And that to then have that be what she's referencing was kind of a jarring tonal shift. And that was the moment when that flashback happens, because it switches from like incredibly turn of the millennium indie rock to some very like tender music in the background, and that I believe flashback was shown in black and white, because there are some artistic flourishes in this movie that show that this is a cheap, quickly produced movie, but made by people who kind of understand how to make movies, but are just working within their means. But full disclosure, the first 20 to 25 minutes of this movie, I was fully convinced that this movie was making fun of horror tropes. I thought it was a comedy. I thought, okay, I see what they're doing. They're having fun with these character types. They're making it broad and they're making it kind of silly. We're only a couple years removed from the Kevin Williamson, snippety snappity dialogue, which people were
Yeah.
still very much doing in 2002.
We saw it in Bleed, right? They were trying to very much do
Yes,
like a Kevin Williamson
right.
style,
And
like
Bleed would have
dream.
come out just after, very shortly after this.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, I think that everyone's sort of in on the joke. I think everyone gets what this movie's doing. Till that flashback scene, and I went, oh no, okay, they're playing this straight. And we've said before, when you're talking about bad movie and whether or not we recommend this, whether or not we can find enjoyment, we can all agree whatever the intention of the filmmakers are, the finished product is what most would consider to be conventionally a bad movie. Um, the best kind of bad movies are, sincere dramas that fail.
Yeah.
Attempts at comedy that are bad are not fun, but
No, no,
attempts
not
at
at all.
drama. And I had a real moment where I'm not going to say I laughed at the movie, but when I realized that they were playing it straight with that flashback, I went, oh, okay, no, like this is just these filmmakers are using a template of movies that have come before it, some movies that would come after it, and they're trying to say something. I don't want to equate this movie to The Room
No, it's
because
not that. Yeah.
it's this is much more competently made than The Room, and I think the scenes make sense within context, but there is a very like intentionality of a film student approach to this movie. Like this is the kind of movie that people I knew in film class when I was 19, 20, 21 years old
Yeah.
would be trying to make, and they would feel like they were making a grand statement.
Yeah, yeah.
And it has that kind of student film vibe to it. Like there are moments where there are artistic flourishes where I'm like, that's cool. I like what they did there. I like that this isn't just a two shot. I like that this isn't just, although hilariously, the introductory classroom scene is almost all in close up, except for a shot where it then cuts away. And it's like, oh, wait, there are other people in this class because it starts with just close ups of like the four main kids and the professor. And I was like,
Yeah.
what art class is this that there's only four students and they're calling their professor Colin? But then it cuts and there are other people who aren't, because there's no wide shots of the classroom. And I
Yeah.
don't really know the reasoning for why that is. Uh, I want to take this opportunity before we get too much more into the plot and the particular scenes that follow in the movie. But let me tell you that casual, like I don't follow the curriculum college professor is one of my favorite tropes.
Mm.
This made me think of a movie. Well, first of all, I love college professors in movies. I think we've talked about this before where they are having some complete non sequitur conversation that seems to have lasted for the entire period. And
Yeah.
then they just casually bring up what the actual learning objective for the class was 4 seconds before the bell rings. And then they just go, okay, read chapters 5 and 6 for homework, and then you guys will be all caught up. It's like, well, what was this class about? Like,
Yeah.
I would be complaining to the dean or to someone in HR for the school, like, I'm paying good money for this college course. I don't know if this person is qualified,
Right.
but it reminded me of a movie. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, Steve, called After Midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an anthology movie from I think about 1989 with Pamela Adlon and Marg Helgenberger and Helgenberg and Judy Aronson and a couple other like popular B movie people. And in that movie, the whole inciting incident is that they're taking a college course which is just like psychoanalyzing fear. And on the first day of class, the professor pretends to shoot a student in the head,
Oh God.
and
Yeah,
then
that's right.
the student pisses himself and becomes a laughing stock. Then the teacher immediately after that has squibs and a fake hairpiece in the back of his head and pretends to blow his own brains out in front of the students, and it's all met with kind of like a quiet applause, like, ah, he got us. Look at
Yeah.
him. Like as if these people wouldn't immediately just scatter full speed out of the classroom and drop the class immediately. They then go from there to the professor's house, which is then what sets up the anthology stories in it. You know what? After Midnight, kind of a fun movie.
Yeah, it's got
I
stuff.
actually recommend watching that one. But I got such a kick out of Colin the Professor because it's like, who is this guy?
Well, we
Like,
know this guy, right? Did you have a professor like this? I fully had a professor that was just like, oh yeah, this guy's fucking like at least half the girls in this class. Like he is not even really trying to hide that he's having these inappropriate relationships with his students.
no, I only had I took predominantly, especially at the graduate level, I took primarily education courses. Usually those were female professors for the most
Mm,
part. And if they were a male professor for some of my literature courses or other things I had, they were kind of older. I had maybe one or two what I feel like people thought could be construed as a conventionally attractive male professor, but I never got this kind of like, oh, I'm super chill and I've got patches on the elbows of my jacket and I'm trying to bang half of the female population in my class. No, I've
right.
never personally experienced that kind of professor. You were in a class with more than one person like this?
I have had these professors. I've had at least two professors like this in the past, who were like maybe skewed a little younger, and they just, there is a vibe around like younger academic guys that's like very cocky, very kind of self-important. And I think this actor, Barrett Walls, I think he does a good job of capturing that kind of vibe. I think he is one of the only one or two people in this cast who actually continued on with acting after this. I think most of these were like buddies or film school friends or people, just kind of doing little short films here and there. I don't think most of the actors in this kind of went on to anything. And I thought like generally the cast was pretty good. Like I think everybody's generally pretty good in this. Like, and I think the screenplay is actually not terrible. I think
Right.
it has some issues with they like to really drop a lot of like groaner dad jokes early on. I really
Sure.
wanted to smack that class clown character in the face the entire time. And when he kind of is emerging as like the nice guy hero of the movie, I'm like, nope, I reject this. This guy sucks. Because I've been in
I
classes
reg-
with this guy too, right? Who needs to have a little
Mhm.
comment for every single thing and just like really is very amused with himself.
Well, the
Like I
jock
yeah.
guy is kind of our avatar because there's a moment where he turns to him and is like, "Hey, have you ever considered an unexpressed thought?"
Yeah, exactly. Like I was I
And
was
it's
I
like,
was
"I hear
siding
you."
with the guy with the frosted tips, which should tell you how bad this guy's energy was. But like this is a movie that's attempting a lot of things. It's got like some kind of like snappy repartee. It's not all exactly like witty. It doesn't all necessarily land, but I think everybody is pretty clued in on what they're trying to do.
I would agree that I think this is a again, let's preface by saying for such a cheap short quickly made movie, this is for what I'm assuming is probably not something with much time to polish and rewrite. I agree with you that it's not a terrible screenplay. And this is one of the rare occasions where I feel like having non-actors actually worked in favor of this movie.
Yeah,
Normally it's not. Normally it's to its detriment. Normally it's like, okay, well, I wanted to use authentic people off the street and non-actors, and it's like, okay, well, it shows. Here, I think, yeah, there's definitely some stilted line readings. It's definitely some moments where maybe they're showing that there's a lack of range. But I think one thing that having people who were not really established actors or people who maybe weren't trying to become professional actors in this movie
mhm,
did was it made the people in this movie feel a little bit more like real people. Like they
yeah,
felt a little bit more like people I could have gone to college with, especially like, okay, in 2002, I was still in college. I definitely sat across from people like this. Like, okay, there's one girl who's like very conventionally attractive and definitely looks a little bit older than everyone else.
sure,
There's someone who is a little bit older than everyone else who is, trying to get better her life and go back to school.
yeah.
There's the class clown guy. There's the jock guy. Lord knows I was probably decked out in the same fashions as these people. So
Oh God, unfortunately, I probably was. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they
I had a
felt
sideburn
very picked
phase.
from that. Yeah, we
Yeah.
all did, and they felt very picked from that era. And I think that actually lent some credibility to them being just these art students working on it. It never felt, when it went into these darker flashbacks or origin stories or stories of trauma, it never felt like somebody who decided, okay, here's my moment where I'm going to try to do something for my reel. It was
Well,
just like,
yeah, there's a lot of that. Here's the weird takeaway that I had, which is kind of strange for coming from a horror podcaster, but I think this would have been a much, much, much stronger movie if they cut the horror element out of this entirely. And you almost could do it because they don't introduce any kind of like supernatural gore, anything like that. They don't introduce that element until 53 minutes in to an 85-minute movie. All right. When it does like start to happen, it starts to happen very quickly and almost abruptly. And we'll get to the ending, to really kind of put a capper on that. But it feels like they wanted to do kind of like a Linklater-esque like hangout movie, right? This is college students who don't really have a lot in common. They've been asked to do this weird art project, and they're going to sit around and they're going to be open about their traumas. They're going to have some interpersonal conflicts. The professor is the facade of his like kind of haughty sort of coolness is sort of falling away, and we see that he's kind of just this fucked up like divorced guy who's trying to figure out his own shit. All of this I thought was interesting and pretty well handled. It's not going to be like the level of a Slacker or a Before Sunset or something like that, but it had that kind of energy, and I wish they'd had the courage to stick to that without injecting the genre.
Steve, what this movie is College Breakfast Club with a killer mannequin.
Yeah, exactly, which is a really weird, like, and I just feel like I could have gotten much more on board with this if they just omitted the killer mannequin entirely.
Now I'm just imagining a scene where Emilio Estevez is having a black and white flashback about taping someone's hairy butt cheeks together.
Yeah.
With a lot of sad music is swelling in the background.
We get to see that in detail. We get to see what's the gun that Anthony Michael Hall brings to.
It's like a flare gun.
It's like a flare gun. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we see him tucking the flare gun in there, which a flare gun would fuck you up. Let's be honest. It probably won't kill you, but you'll have a bad time. But yeah, that was the stuff I was kind of getting a little bit more on board with. And when they were doing that, and like when the movie's just kind of hanging out in the bar, and everybody's just like talking about their past experience and like sharing what possessed them to put this piece into their art. I'm like, all right, I'm kind of on board with this. This has like early Clerks vibes, of like, this is clearly an amateurish production. These are not professional actors. Like, it's not the most polished like dialogue or anything like that, but it feels a little bit more heartfelt and genuine. I felt like the movie is not terribly interested in the Jigsaw part of it.
I agree. I think this movie would have been equally interested if these 4 or 5 people just decided to make a vision board instead.
Yeah. And I could be wrong. I mean, look, Don Adams and Harry Picardi, they had done one previous full moon movie. They're buddies of J.R. Bookwalter going back forever. They did a previous movie for full moon that wound up being called Vengeance of the Dead, I believe, which we will cover, I'm sure, in time. And they went on to continue working for Full Moon. Like, they're both kind of jobbers, right? They'll edit movies, or they'll do Foley work, or they'll be background artists. Like, they kind of hung around in the Full Moon fold for a couple of years and just did a little bit of everything. So they obviously have like an interest in this kind of like low budget filmmaking, but this movie just kind of felt like they pushed this supernatural element into a pre-existing script that maybe hadn't been completely finished.
That's fair.
Which leads to a movie that is not completely finished.
Sure.
Because to jump to the ending, all right, so everybody gets picked off except for the professor and like the nice girl, right? The kind of innocent, like youngest girl. The professor, in his drunken, crazed mania, decides to clunk her on the head like a cartoon character, tie her to the pool table in her underwear for some reason. I don't know why he needed to get her into her underwear to do that.
With Christmas lights.
And then he's basically just going to sacrifice this girl to the Jigsaw mannequin. He has no reason to think this will work. He has no evidence that we don't know what animated this thing. We don't know what it wants, what its motivations are.
That's what
we don't know. So
this.
yeah.
Listen, I know we say all the time, like, get to the point faster with a lot of these movies.
Yeah.
Like, some of these movies are 75-minute movies that feel like slogs because the pacing is very slow. I think with this one actually needed, I don't know if it definitely didn't need more runtime, but it definitely needed a scene or something early on where the professor talks about the rules of this mannequin, or if, talks about what could happen if this kind of exquisite corpse is put together with certain kinds of trauma. It'll, it'll signal the blah blah blah, and then this will
Yeah.
happen. But there's no mention, like you said. It's almost like a poor coincidence that they put this thing together, and it looks like a kind of steampunk version of the camera face Cenobite from Hellraiser 3.
A little bit, yeah. And look, I think I can safely speak for both of us in saying we're not too picky about how your exposition gets done. One of our mutual favorite movies features the villain being resuscitated by flaming dog piss. Okay, we don't need anything more than that. If you want to tell me that flaming dog piss made this mannequin come to life, that's really all I need. But we just don't even get that animating moment. Like the last time we see Jigsaw, he's being melted down to nothing. Like there shouldn't be an intact mannequin here, and yet there is. And he has a closed circuit TV for an eye, and he has firework heads, and then he's got a saw for an arm. And it is not a jigsaw, to be clear. A jigsaw is like narrow and thin, like this is a like a saw blade. This is I think the character is called Jigsaw because he's been assembled from a lot of different pieces. They have a line early in this movie that I thought was really funny, where it's like he says that a jigsaw, like life, is what we make of it. And I'm like, dude, that is exactly not what a jigsaw puzzle is. A jigsaw puzzle is a preordained picture that you need to assemble in the correct order if it's going to make sense. Like this, maybe you're thinking of Legos. Like you can use this analogy with Legos. You can
Right.
with a jigsaw puzzle. Like
I mean,
there's
you could
picture on the box that
potentially,
you need to match.
you could put the wrong pieces together, and then when you look at the finished product, there's going to be, little cutouts of your table from underneath in between where the pieces don't fit. So sure, if that's the finished product that you're looking for, then you can do that. Now, yeah, there are moments where the screenplay is trying to be clever like that. There are a lot of groaner one-liners early on in the movie.
Yeah.
I will say, and you mentioned the ending of this movie. For anyone who hasn't seen this movie, it's hard to spoil
All
it
two of
because,
you.
yeah, it's hard to spoil the ending of this movie because all I can say really is that I think The Sopranos had a more definitive ending than this movie
Genuinely,
does.
like okay, yeah, that's the situation we find ourselves in. The professor has sacrificed this girl to Jigsaw. He walks in, he makes some threatening kind of like Jigsaw motions at her while she looks at best mildly annoyed. And then instead he passes her up, goes for the professor, swings his saw blade. We hear a squelch and literally hard cut credits, the end.
Hard cut so much that the how do I say this? The like viewing screen on Tubi was already minimized. Like already
Yeah.
what it was suggesting next was large on my TV, and the credits were in a small box in the top right-hand corner. Like as
Yeah.
soon as that cut happened.
Yeah, it was so abrupt. We never get any sort of resolution as to what happens to the girl on the table. Like, does she get out? Does Jigsaw ever stop? Like, is he ever there? Is this a figment of somebody's imagination? We get nothing. Like, it literally
Yeah,
it's just over.
I was really confused. I was wondering, like, when does Andrew McCarthy come in and grab Jigsaw, and when do they start playing Starship?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can build this dream together. Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's probably the wrong song. I don't remember, but
No,
yeah.
that's the right song.
Hey, all right, okay, I'm awake. Yeah, but it was just so abrupt, and it's an ending that is not really earned for the movie that they were setting up, for the 20 something minutes of horror that they had set up, which is
Right.
mostly fairly indifferent, for all the buildup we give to the character of Tawny, with her backstory about her sister and all of that. She just gets executed. But I did want to circle back on that because, like, yeah, it is this like big moment of her revealing this really super intense trauma. But then we follow it up with an extended scene of her like drunkenly giving a lap dance to the mannequin and just kind of like showboating around the bar while everybody leers. And weirdly, I thought that was really effective because I'm like, I think the movie wanted that moment to feel kind of sad in a strange way. Like she's putting on this performative, like party girl goofiness, like this burlesque of trying to act like she's living her life to the fullest, but really she's just kind of embarrassing herself. And you see it as a cry for help because you've just heard a little bit about her trauma. And I'm like, all right, this is weirdly effective. Like, I think that's what the movie is going for, and I think it's coming across.
Yeah, I agree. My biggest, I don't want to say pet peeve because that's not the right way to word this, but I think where the movie kind of makes a misstep is you have a real opportunity. Now, if the movie did this and it's something that I missed, I take full responsibility for missing this. But I think, like they do with Tawny, she ends up getting shotgun blasted in the face.
Yeah,
which is essentially
a full circle
callback,
moment, right?
the full circle moment. I think you have to construct this where all of these people get a full circle moment. It needs to be like a Willy Wonka. It needs to be like a Dream Warriors.
Yeah, their
like
trauma
whatever
is
your trauma is
Yeah.
has to come back to get you. I think that would have been really interesting. I actually think when the scene with Connie happened, that's where I thought this movie was going. I was like, oh, that's interesting now. Okay, so what Jigsaw is going to do is he's going to take all these traumas and it's going to be the downfall of these people. But it's not really. Like, there's one, I will say, as cheap as it is and as easily telegraphed as it is, I did get a little chuckle out of the bartender watching them in the woods on the screen. You know, it is obviously telegraphed to the point where you don't need to say the line, I'm about to have a heart attack. All you got to do is go, put your hand on your heart. We get it.
Yeah,
we know what's happening. We know you're turned on and you did not expect to see this half-naked woman. I understand all of that. But for then, he sort of does get his full circle moment because he has a heart attack that lasts him from walking into the woods back into the bar so he could fall down clutching his chest. And I will say, this is a movie with a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And in these ideas, I think the filmmakers said, we want to show some artistic flair. We don't want to just have a character fall down dead and cut to the next thing. We want to use music. We want to have scenes transition from color to black and white as the camera pans away. We want kind of somber or morose music occasionally playing in the background during some more of the heartfelt scenes.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's at odds with some of the broad campiness that the movie has at other times. And the scene where the bartender is dying of his heart attack takes approximately 6 minutes of the runtime.
He really milks it. Yeah.
I couldn't help but just kind of chuckle. I'm like, this was the wrong choice. Like, I get what you're doing here. I get that you're trying to give this some artistic flair. You're trying to use some film technique here. It's just, this is not where you do that. Like, it's somewhere in another polish of this script where you think about how you have these full circle moments come around. That's when you do that. Not in the scene where you have a character who's not even one of the main characters get the longest protracted death scene in which there is no gore and nothing happening.
Yeah.
It was silly. And it was one of those moments where something that is sincere, a sincere attempt at a dramatic moment in the movie, is so kind of overblown and poorly handled that it becomes funny.
Yeah. I don't know. There are a lot of things going on here. I largely found myself getting distracted by their bar orders because we need to talk about what an insane round of drinks this group orders. They order, first of all, he calls them White Russian roulette. It's whiskey shots. Okay, that is not White Russians in any way, shape, or form. Then they have Irish car bombs. Okay, so if you're not familiar with an Irish car bomb, it's a drop shot, meaning you take a little bit of Kahlua or whiskey and you drop it in the Guinness, and then you need to chug the entire thing.
And I
They
don't
let
mean
it
to interrupt you,
sit.
Steve, but
Yeah.
I think like there is nothing that you can do to timestamp a movie between the years of 1996 and
Oh
2004
yeah.
than an Irish car bomb.
My
Only
very
only
first
a Jaeger
alcoholic
bomb.
beverage. Yeah, my very first alcoholic beverage ever was an Irish car bomb. So that, and it would have been about 2002. So that really took me back. But the trick with an Irish car bomb, if you've never done one of these, is if you're using the Kahlua, you need to drink it quickly. Otherwise, it is going to rise to the top and it is going to curdle really quickly. These guys let this thing sit for like 5 minutes before they drink it. So I was getting like antsy. That was the most tension in the entire movie for me, was waiting for them to drink this. Then they order Robitussin. They're literally doing like cough syrup shots in the bar. And
And
then they
he
have,
has it, which I don't even have cough syrup in my house.
no,
Like,
no, but he just
I mean,
has it
and
in
I
the
get the
bar.
common cold from time to time, and I don't even have that medicine available in my house. I always have to go out and buy it when I do get
Yeah.
sick. This guy just has it as something that he's not saving for when he's sick, saving for when people order it like perfectly normal bar patrons.
Like, is he making flaming moes or something? Like, what is he doing back
You
there? I have
damn it.
no idea.
God damn you, Steve. You beat me to it. That was the next thing that I was going to say.
Sorry. But then they follow up their Robitussin shots with mimosas at night, which I know, look, technically you can be drinking champagne and orange juice at night, but it feels wrong, right? It just feels off. It's a really strange round of drinks. I think all of them are going to be, the ones that survive are going to be deeply sick the next
No,
day
this
because
the
they are.
statute of drink limitation ends at 5 p.m. for a mimosa. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And this just feels like, yeah, I would say it's accurate because this feels like the kind of hodgepodge of drinks that college students would have, because you're
Sure.
still kind of figuring out your palate, and you're just kind of drinking hyper sugary or like kind of really intense or overly complicated drinks, so
Yeah.
they're really going for it. But I
Yeah.
found
So
that
I was
distracting.
I was 21 when this movie came out and
Mhm.
ordering drinks in bars, and it made me think of one of the most heinous things that I used to do. I became friends with a woman who was a few years older than me who worked in the restaurant that I worked in when I turned 21. And she was like, this is what I do when I go out drinking. I start every single time with a shot of Yukon Jack. Now,
What?
Yukon Jack is because she said everything you drink after from that point on will taste like water and go down like water.
Okay.
So
All right.
I started every time I went out with a shot of Yukon Jack, which is technically a whiskey. It does not taste like a whiskey. It's more in the vein of like a Southern Comfort
Okay.
type. It's got that sort of like lime flavor to it, but it's notoriously disgusting to the point where the bottle of Yukon Jack, if they still make it, doesn't even say really that it's a whiskey on it. It literally just says Yukon Jack, and then under that it says the black sheep of Canadian liqueurs.
Yeah, it's a liqueur. It's not technically a whiskey. Yeah, which is unusual. I think they do still make it. I'm wondering if this is kind of the same philosophy that surrounds like Malort, to shout out to
So
all of
it
our
is
Chicago buddies.
to be fair, it's a liqueur made of whiskey and honey.
Yeah.
So it is there's whiskey in it, but Yukon Jack itself is not like a brand of whiskey. It is a whiskey liqueur. So,
Yeah. As a
but yeah,
as a
I have
slight
not
digression, have you ever heard of a steptoe cocktail?
I have not.
Okay, apparently this only happens in, speaking of the Yukon, it happens in one very small town in the Yukon. It's a whiskey shot featuring a 100-year-old frozen toe. There is a bar in the Yukon. Somebody came back, their toe fell off because it was so frostbitten. They preserved it. They keep it in like the distilling in this bottle, a bottle of whiskey. And apparently it's just like a
Uh-huh.
tradition. If you pass through this town, you have to take a step-toe cocktail. I don't know if they still do that. I imagine the FDA has a lot of problems with it, but yeah, famously one of the grossest drinks out there. Yeah.
Wow. I was
Shout
going
out
to
to the
say for a
Yukon.
second, how did we get here? But honestly, those students' bar orders, and honestly, also the fact that there is a bubble maker, like a bubble machine in this
Yeah.
bar. There's a random assortment of vinyl records hung up on one of the walls. It doesn't make a ton of sense. It's just clearly stuff that they needed for the script was brought to this bar, and I'm thinking a lot of the set dressing was just the bar itself. Uh, I appreciate that Billy Joel's nylon curtain got some love in the background of one of the scenes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
uh it's one of those albums that I think is pretty good, and it's
yeah,
not as popular as The Stranger or 52nd Street or
yeah,
Glass Houses. But I like that when I saw that one in the background. They're one of his kind of weirder albums.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, like I mentioned before, this is a movie that's chock full of ideas, maybe too many seeds of ideas, and not none of them fleshed out enough to make a fully uh, effective, cohesive, coherent movie. But
Yeah.
like I can see what they were going for a lot of the time. I think, and this is something I've realized after the fact, and we've alluded to this plenty of times on the show before, but watching this when I was finished with it, I went, okay, I want to watch After Midnight now
Yeah.
because I want to go back and see the, Psychology of Fear opening of that movie again. And I realized like what a huge difference just something being shot on film makes, because there's nothing inherently, yeah, I mean, maybe the budget was larger for After Midnight and there was more equipment and professional crew and more time. But in terms of like the way some of the performances are and stuff like that, like there's nothing inherently recognizably just worse as a blanket statement. It's just that the movie looks like shit, and that's not the movie's fault.
It was the
It's
cameras that
just
they had at the time. Yeah, yeah.
right. It was shooting on video in 2002. Everything looked like dog shit.
Yeah.
It looked the caliber of, like a Telemundo series or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And that's unfortunate because I started to think about for the stuff in this movie that works, and I think there is a decent amount that actually works. If this were made 15 years earlier and it were made for $150,000 and shot on 35 millimeter, there would be times when it's silly and it's broad and it's over the top, but it would look better and it would look more professional and it would look like movies we're more accustomed to seeing. And I think it would play a lot better. Like I can see somebody watching this who's not used to watching movies shot on video in 2002
Hmm.
and being like, "Oh my God, this is like the cheapest, most amateurish thing I've ever seen." I don't think that's fair to say. I think there's a lot of ambition. Its ambition might be its detriment at times
Yeah.
because it can't do some of the things it promises and introduces.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
someone might be like, "This is the worst made movie I've ever seen," and that's 90% because of how it looks, which
Yeah.
is not the fault of the filmmakers. And so
Yeah.
I think there are occasionally scenes that are, again, you have to think about how you're framing shots for aspect ratio, how you're blocking for shooting on video differently than you would 35 millimeter film. And it shows here. Everything is smaller, everything's more personal, most things are close up. And that's just what they had to do to tell this story. And I think there are enough interesting, fulfilled and unfleshed out ideas in this movie
Yeah.
where they were kind of onto something but really hindered. And that's why when I read that JR liked this one, I thought, yeah, I think there is a lot to like in the ambition here. My
Absolutely.
question I have is, why does this movie seem to be one that Charles Band does not champion?
Strangely, well, and I think things we don't know the full story there, and I've never really wanted to pry, but I think things went a little south between Charles Band and Tempe. I think they transitioned. I don't know. I don't know the exact story, but I feel like a lot of movies of this era are kind of buried. And this was also the era, as we talked about, like where he was giving the smallest budgets to all of his shows. He was giving, or to all of his movies. He was, giving some of the faster turnaround times on all of these. So like production was very hard scrabble, and it's kind of amazing that we got as many quality Tempe movies as we could out of this situation. So it must have been a difficult time to kind of work on movies at this time, and so I
You
understand
think
if the tempers
that's
flared. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think that's really just it? You think it's a timing thing? You think that just with it being a late Tempe movie, that sort of like the tempestuous relationship between Charles Band and JR kind of cutting ties at that time
Yeah, I'm
really is,
wondering. I can
you
really
know,
only speculate, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, a lot, it should be noted, a ton of this show is speculation. But
That's
I
weird.
was trying to think about that, like why, and I don't want to be facetious and reductive and say, oh, he doesn't really like this movie because there's no tiny terrors in it. It's just
Right, right, right,
a
right.
life-size terror. But
Yeah.
I think that's unfortunate for this movie too, is it's destined to be largely forgotten because it is this late Tempe production when the budgets were slashed in micro. Charles Band was ready to move on. I mean, Shadow is lurking right around the corner, no pun intended.
Yay. It's been
And
that fun. Go ahead.
yeah, Devin Hamilton would be making some very cheap slasher type movies very shortly after this. And we know that's not Charles Band's favorite subgenre. So
No.
maybe it's just kind of the 1-2 punch of this not being in the wheelhouse of the type of movie he generally likes to produce, mixed with the fact that he was ready to move on. I mean, if we know anything about Charles Band, he's kind of like a shark in that he's always moving and always, bouncing back from whatever financial windfall or bankruptcy or whatever the hurdle might be. And it's kind of, I feel like maybe it was an afterthought already at the
Y-
point that this thing
Yeah.
even came out.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's kind of where it was. But I think this is a really interesting experiment. I think it's worth checking out if you keep your expectations kind of in the right place. Like, I think there's a lot to sort of glom onto here, and I understand why it's so polarizing. Because it is, if you're going in for a horror film, that's not exactly what you're getting. And this is heavily marketed in that regard. So yeah, but it's I love a big swing, and we've been encountering a few of those like in this era, and we've encountered it so many times with JR's movies and with Danny Dravid's movies and things like that, where it's clear that there is some real talent behind the camera here, that is maybe just being limited by their budget and by the production schedule and by the general kind of working conditions on making these movies. So you have to kind of judge the potential, and you have to judge kind of what they were trying to do, because any other film production would have at least had another week to try and polish up some of these things. They would have had access to better cameras, better audio equipment, things like that. And it would have been a little bit more polished, but
Yeah,
this one,
they're
they're doing what they can with what they have. And I think there is some talent on display here. I think there are some ideas on display. And it's kind of, I always enjoy movies like that when instead it's just like a cynical cash grab, or just like a whatever, this'll sell a toy. Like, yeah, it's nothing like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a borrowed concept, which is not a big deal. I mean, we're dealing with Full Moon and Tempe and Charles Band, and so there's going to be a lot of exploitation of trends and things that already exist. So that's not shouldn't be surprising to anyone. But I do think there are moments in this movie where there's some artistic flair. There were shots where they had action showing through a television set, either in black and white or in color, just a little change from the basic everything is shot straight on close up with people. There were times like, oh, what if we do this way? What if we have the story be told this way? And even little things like changing the using slow-mo or changing the frame rate in some black and white flashbacks and stuff like that just showed that it was like, okay, we're hindered by this budget, but we're going to try and do some things to make this stand out a little bit. So, I brought up The Room before because The Room is a movie that was made by someone who loves movies but had absolutely no concept or grasp of cinematic language.
Because he's a space alien. Yeah, pretty sure.
Correct.
Still to this day, pretty sure.
And here I feel like this kind of movie is a little bit different in the sense that, this looked cheaper than a movie like The Room because we all know how Tommy Wiseau secured the millions of dollars to make that movie.
Yeah,
It, for all its faults, looks like a movie at times.
yeah,
And this is cheap and looks more like a television show, and a cheap television show at that for a lot of it. But the filmmakers understood that you can change up, like the scenes shouldn't just be people walking into a location saying hi to one another and then sitting down.
yeah.
They definitely changed it up. They definitely shot from different angles. They had a couple of fun artistic flourishes. And again, very first drafty, very snippety snappity Kevin Williamson, Kevin Smith type dialogue that they're trying to do here. Maybe, somebody else brought in to be like, okay, you can cut that one. We get it. He's a class clown. You don't need this one.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. A lot of first draft problems. But honestly, I enjoyed watching this because, like you said, that I this one lands firmly in the camp of like a true oddity. And for
Definitely.
that reason, I was never bored watching it. I
No,
never went, oh, this is actually kind of a hidden gem and a really good movie. I thought, I see what they're going for. It's not quite working, but I
yeah,
appreciate that
but
they're trying.
yeah.
And that was the way I kind of walked away from it and was like, I think this is not terrible, all things considered. And because it's so overlooked and because it's so forgotten and probably dismissed, because I think if you saw the artwork and didn't see that it was 2002 and saw that it was full moon, you would just assume that it was something cashing in on the trend of Saw and all of its sequels, which is not what happened.
No,
And so I understand, people not being aware of this one, but of some of the micro budget movies of the late Tempe and Shadow and early 2000s full moon stuff, I think there is an ambition here which hamstrings the movie, but also shows us that it's made by people who have an understanding in even the most rudimentary sense of how to make a movie.
yeah.
And I think it's moderately successful for that. And so I'm glad that we chose this one because it was a completely different movie than what I was expecting to see,
Yeah,
for better or worse. But I think for better.
I think for better. Yeah, I think in general I'm coming down pretty positively on this for trying something. But yeah, well, thank you everybody for listening. I think we've about tapped all that we can get out of Jigsaw
I'd
at the
say.
moment. But where can people find our social media and all of that stuff?
Oh, Steve, I thought you'd never ask.
Well, I did.
If you did, you know what? You always come through. You're just you're a good guy pretending to be a scumbag. Listeners, he's not really a scumbag. If you like what we do on this show, the best way to show us is to go on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a 5-star rating. If you want to write a review of the show, that's amazing too, because that helps us out a lot. You can comment on Spotify as you're listening, just to interact with the show or to correct something we said that's wrong, or to give us any experiences you might have with the movie that we left out and you want to just kind of chime in. Spotify comments are a ton of fun. If you have a connection to this movie or feedback for the show that you think is a little long for a Spotify comment, you can email us at puppetmasterscastlefreaks@gmail.com. The best way to keep up with what we're doing on a daily basis is through Instagram. You can follow the show at puppetmasters_castlefreaks. You can follow me at _giallo_jared or Steve at Minotaur Matador. There is an audio version of the show on YouTube. We also update on Threads and Blue Sky and in our Facebook group and some other full moon related Facebook groups. So if you just search for us, you will be able to find us and keep up with everything that we're doing. But don't just keep up with us. Steve has a whole other show that you should be keeping up on. So Steve, what else have you got going on?
Well, you should also check out my show, Cinema Arcade. That is cinema and arcade mashed together into one beautiful sloppy portmanteau, because that's what we're doing. We are talking about movies and then playing the video games based on those movies, which allows us the opportunity to talk about a huge diversity of films. For example, by the time you're listening to this, we just wrapped up our series on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And obviously, the only thing to follow up that epic saga is 1961's The Hustler, which definitely needs to have a video game. Obviously, it has a video game. And of course, we need to follow that up with things like Monsters Incorporated and a bunch of Ninja Turtles movies. And a lot
They didn't only call him fat because he had a second breakfast.
Exactly. He loves potatoes.
I'm sorry, everyone.
That's pretty good. That was pretty good. But yes, check that out wherever you get your podcasts. And check us out next week, because we are going way back into the timeline. One of our earliest films that we're going to be covering, the film that Charles Band considers his proper directorial debut, because he is distancing himself from Last Tango in Burbank, or Last Foxtrot in Burbank. So instead, we're going to be talking about a movie from 1976 called Crash! Exclamation point.
Yeah, you got to say it like that. You got to really
keeping
hit
up a
that
nice
exclamation mark.
Actually, this is a nice run of movies that have the same titles as other movies, right? Because we actually rank all the different crashes in that episode, so we'll talk all about that. But
Sure do.
this is a movie. If you're not familiar with it, it is a movie about a woman who starts psychically controlling cars to start killing people.
Yeah,
Very weird
very fun
idea.
one.
Lots of fun car crashes, and it's deeply strange. And we had a good time talking about it. So definitely check that one out next week. Crash.
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 We will see you all next week. Thank you for listening to this episode on Jigsaw. I'm going to say, if you did not know about this movie, which you very possibly might not have, even as a full moon completist, definitely check it out because it is an odd one. If you didn't get that from our conversation, I'm recommending that you watch it and see what they were going for, because I think there's some interesting ideas. And we definitely are going to have a fun one next week for Crash. So I hope to see all of you back here next week. And I just want to say, they don't call me Springfield Fat just because I'm morbidly obese.